Welcome back to the SOC, everybody. We're over in North America now. It is Dawson and Finch on the call for what should be a good final matchup between two teams with some good name recognition there, Finch.
Yeah, I would say so here, Dolson. It's a bit weird to be on this side of things, but I'll do my best to try and keep this going for you here, bud. Yeah, like you said, though, there should be some players that you all are fairly familiar with here on both sides. Button Mashers, maybe not as much. Jingu Bang and Data Remember should certainly stand out here to you all, but Return has a bunch of people that have been around the SML minor league level forever, right? With Clow and Gilly and Snatty and Quig and Griff, who obviously a very successful console player, so maybe a slight edge to Return in that regard, but I expect this to be close.
Well, you can see both teams had very similar routes through their quarterfinals, semifinals, now onto the finals. 2-0 for both of these two teams against teams that we saw in the finals just last week. Too Much Xbox, I remember seeing in the NA finals last week here in the SOC, so Button Mashers being able to take the 2-0 over them. Certainly good. Now, I wonder, and we saw a little bit of this in set number one, Finch, kind of how this SOC meta tends to differ maybe from the SPL meta, especially with some perennial kind of comp band characters that are now starting to make their way back in. Obviously, for Picarino, the Scylla was pivotal there in that set. I wonder how much difference we get from the top-tier SMITE pick band kind of meta versus down here in the SOC.
Well, so far it has seemed different, Dave. I think that's a good point for you to try and bring up. I don't think we'll be seeing the same sort of exact stuff from the SPL. If for any reason, not Gore, but Dave, it's just because I think that they're playing a bit looser here in the SOC, right? So there's more room for different types of picks to work. And you mentioned that we're going to be seeing different bans happening. It's exactly right. I believe at this point, Persephone, the only god that's still banned, everything else is on the table. Baba Yaga can be picked up. We've seen her do well. Morgan, I expect to be valued too. But really, it's hard to know exactly what we're going to be seeing from these guys. I just expect that we'll see a bunch of picks that could independently carry the game. That type of thing, I think, will get a bit more value than normal.
At least what we saw in set number one, and we do see it from time to time in the SPL, but it's kind of these independently snowballed games where it's just a mid lane mismatch or a jungle mismatch, and things just kind of spiral out of control from there. I mean, I want to pile on Nevi, obviously a tough game or a tough set there in set number one, but just kind of complete discrepancy in what one jungler was able to do versus the other, and then the game just kind of snowballed out of control differently from maybe how we see in the SPL. So maybe some of the snowball potential picks start to come to the forefront. I do want to kind of keep a focus maybe on the jungle, see where these two junglers end up going here throughout picks and bans. Or, though, first taken away here, not different from the SPL. We're still right at the top of the board as far as flexibility and a relatively safe pick early on.
Yeah, this makes a ton of sense to me. He fits kind of into that bill I was saying of someone who could potentially take over that mid game kind of on his own, especially if he's able to find a lead over there in the long lane. So it makes sense to ban this one out. But this is exactly the kind of stuff that I'm expecting to be banned. I think you were right to highlight the mid jungle. That mid 3v3 actually is going to be huge here. I'm thinking Gilly, Clow, and Quig should be a pretty tough kind of combo to deal with in that middle lane for Return, so we'll see what Button Mashers look for in response, but I'm expecting stuff that could kind of come to fruition in that mid game, maybe not right out the gate, but that mid to late stuff start to come through, and whichever one of those comes into the lead, into that 20-25 minute mark with the lead, they might have an advantage.
You know what was interesting, Finch, is that Morgan was available this past week in the SPL, and I feel like we just kind of saw her glossed over. I don't even know if we saw her in the ban column really at all, but Button Mashers are going to kind of go the opposite route, take Morrigan away. I mean, she is absolutely powerful. Why do you think, maybe here in the SOC, she still carries some weight?
Yeah, you got to make sure, man, because, I don't want to kind of beat a dead horse here, but that Morrigan's the kind of pick where if you let that mid laner go unchecked, she can win the game almost single-handedly at times, but she gets out of control. There's so much value from the base mage kit, playing almost like an assassin, and then when you're right in the thick of it, you transform into either someone really tanky that can use their control to get value out of that positioning, or maybe even someone like an assassin who can blow up with some big control right away, like an Unboss or something like that, and then you reposition. You don't want to have to deal with a Morgan in that spot, so she makes a ton of sense to me to ban. There's still a lot of really good picks left, like the Heimdall. Agreed. Those things too could be valued or grabbed, so there's a lot on the table.
Yeah, and outside of Morgan, no real priority ban-wise in the other 5. Raijin taken first by Button Masher, so you talk about late-game damage scaling potential. The Raijin certainly has that and can absolutely melt down enemy gods. Now for return, a Thor and a Kuzenbo. Thor, not all that surprising. You talk about hitting that level 5 mark, making an immediate impact all throughout the map. The Kuzenbo, I don't think it's surprising in the sense that he's a bad pick. We just don't see him all that often.
We don't, and he'll likely be going over to the support role, and he gives you some great early lane potential. His reflect is really strong too into a lot of what's really popular right now, and Watery Grave is great disruption. But I really think that there's a lot to kind of dissect here. The Raijin, it's not just his late game that you have to worry about. Taiko drums level 5, 6, and 7 is so much damage. I don't think that anyone else can kind of match that output right now, so that's a great pickup for Button Mashers to have on their side. The Khepri, when you come to the late game, is going to be hard to stop too. If you're going to be trying to kill one person, well, nothing stops that better than a revive when there's no executes picked up.
And you know, I think with Raijin, and I'm probably the biggest offender of this, but I kind of just look towards the damage, obviously, as you should, but there's a little utility in the Taiko drums as well, whether it's a fear or a taunt, kind of keeping your targets locked in there. Absolutely something that needs to be looked at. Now, in the Nuwa, it's really been Venenu, right? And the SPL has been kind of the Nuwa guy from what we've seen. Obviously, those damage numbers get inflated thanks to the ultimate. You just pop the ult, plug down some good damage. By the end of it, massive numbers. I forgot what Baskin had in what the SEC tournament we had a few weeks ago. Some ridiculous number of damage. But do you like the Nuwa here to kind of counter out, or not counter out, but go toe-to-toe with this Raijin in the mid?
Yeah, it's interesting. Nuwa can clear pretty safely early. I don't think she's going to have to worry too much about getting bullied by the Raijin. Nuwa oftentimes says, don't dive me as well. Those clay soldiers are a great tool when someone's up in melee range with you, plus fire shards, lets her get up and out of combat. So I think that Nuwa is kind of like saying, hey, I'm not a really good viable target for you early, and in the late game, my damage does match just about everyone else too. So Nuwa, certainly a fine pick, great in those base defenses too. So I don't know that Nuwa is maybe my #1 pick when things like Merlin are still out there and available, but she's certainly strong.
And you look at kind of now what the Button Mashers have drafted. I mean, between a Rom, a Khepri, Raijin, Hercules as well. I mean, there's a little bit of self-peel, obviously, baked into that. Some ultimates or big utility ultimates having to be used. Thunder Crash as well defensively. Hercules for a little bit of engage there on that side. And you need it when you have a Thor, a Kuzenbo, and Osiris jumping at you.
It is going to be scary here for them trying to deal with that Kuzenbo. Button Mashers putting this Hercules over in solo. They've got some aggression now at their disposal. Between that Pele and the Hercules, the Khepri very likely, I mean, obviously going to be support here at this point. But I don't know. I wonder when this team is going to be looking to fight. It really depends for me on when we see Jingu Bang look to get active on this Pele. We see Lasbra a lot use it to be aggressive in the early game. If he does that same thing here, then Button Mashers could be good at all stages.
Let's find out not only how Button Mashers elect to play around this composition, but who wins over here in the SOC this week in North America. It will be the Khepri and the Rom over in that long lane. Now Rom has been the target of some number changes and kind of has jumped to the forefront, not necessarily in the SPL just yet, still a lot of Heimdall and some of those other high-tier hunters. But I think Rom is one of the hunters that has now, Finch, started to kind of trickle up some of those tier lists thanks to some recent changes.
He is, and it makes me think of the way that Cyclone Spin's been playing him lately. He likes to ult at the start of fights, right? He likes to use that ultimate to lower the kill threshold for the rest of his team early on, almost like a mage ult, where you can basically pick who you want to take a bunch of damage. And I think that is an area where you can find a lot of additional value from Rom, especially when you've got an aggressive comp like this that can make use of those lower thresholds. Jingu Bang can get back there now. Chronic could get back there now. When they're lowered down by those ults, it makes it a bit easier for your assassins and warriors to get in there and finish that job off.
I'm wondering now, again, how kind of this long lane starts to play out. I mean, obviously, once you get those ultimates online, you're going to plug down some decent damage. But in a lane with a Kuzenbo, I mean, there's always going to be the threat of just kind of the reckless abandon, what we've already seen from Quig, where you just kind of sprint forward, send somebody around. But it's actually more pressure, at least lane-wise. Just level 1, level 2 clear is pushing back towards return. Do you imagine that's kind of how that lane starts to boil down here as the waves continue to push out?
I think so. Rom's early clear has always been really good, so it's no surprise that at the beginning of the way this laning phase is going to go, that button mashers will get some pressure. It's really going to rely on Quig's ability to find some damage, some poke, something like that in this lane. Maybe a blink push through the wave for a bunch of damage to try and get things pushing back their way. But as long as they've got this Rom here, that Astral Arrow clear probably is going to favor button mashers a bit in this early game. But I don't think there's a ton of kill potential really either direction. I don't know that these two teams are looking to try and catapult that lane out of control so much as rotate out later on.
Right. Hachiman certainly plenty safe, and Quig, as aggressive as a Kuzenbo can also be used somewhat defensively here. Some low health bars over in the short lane. A Hercules and an Osiris lane is absolutely going to be a fun one to follow. I mean, you look at a Hercules and just the raw damage numbers he's able to provide early in this game. It is going to force Snatty to half HP and a 1-level deficit. Granted, a somewhat large wave pushing back should even up that level discrepancy there. I suppose there is always going to be some kill potential when you have a Hercules in your lane, and if a Pele, notably in Jingu Bang, is able to rotate, maybe that's where we start to see a first blood opening up.
Yeah, I think that was a good idea from Jingu Bang. If there's nothing there like it ended up being, that he just backs the way that he did, he's right there for the speed buff on respawn, and basically resets his jungle pathing as Griff's in some trouble.
He has to use the beats here, so the pull from Monster Bomber will bring him right back. One final shot from Day to Remember, and Quig can't body block that damage, and that's going to be first blood over to Button Mashers. We wondered if there would be kill potential, and I don't even know, Finch, if that is just the dynamic of these four characters. It looked like Griff was hell-bent on moving over towards that purple buff. The beads used a touch too early, so maybe some mispositioning opens up for that kill.
Yeah, I agree. My man's been around a long time, so he certainly knows better, but that's a bit greedy, I'd argue, from him. In that pathing that he chose to take there back from the purple buff, it's not a death sentence for him in that left lane. He's got plenty of time to try and find a way back on this Hachiman, but just unfortunate that not only the beads goes down, but he dies there and gets button mashers off to a good start there in left, arguably in an unnecessary situation. You know, it didn't have to happen.
Right, and now you kind of look at the dynamic that started to shift elsewhere on this map. Gilly has just reached level 5 on that Thor, and obviously that's kind of the big talking point. Once the Anvil of Dawn comes online, you look to rotate and start to impact some sides of these maps, or some sides of the map, rather. I kind of look at his gank targets, though, and I mean, obviously a lot of it has to do with if you can suddenly slam down on somebody and they're not suspecting it, but you look at Nehu, who built beads and has the Thunder Crash to disengage. It's going to be tough, I think, maybe for Gilly to open up and find some targets for early pressure.
Yeah, he's going to have to get active early and do some of that groundwork, right? Going to have to find a gank where he can take the beads off cooldown, force the ultimates maybe in response, something like that, and then look to get aggressive again. It's something that it might be tough for him to be able to get it done just in one gank attempt. There's a couple ultimates used over here in solo, but still no real kill potential. It shouldn't be, at least, unless Chronic really chooses to walk up and die.
And that is maybe now where you start to look for gank potential. Maybe Gilly isn't going to set it up on his own, but now that the solo laner for Button Mashers is somewhat low, if nothing else, won't be the kill, but will be the blue buff invade here. Rotation out, though, from Jingu Bang. That's going to be Quig blinking forward. Jingu taken low. The double tap from the hammer from Gilly is going to be enough to find some good damage. Anvil of Dawn to the skies. Is he going to get the execute? It's going to be Quig instead who finishes off the kill. Cloud from the mid lane is going to plug down some good damage as well. Blue buff invaded and a kill for return. So a big swing here in this game.
Now that's great pressure there from Return. They didn't super need that ultimate there from Gilly, but it did let him go up and get some information, make sure no one else was rotating, and that he could dunk down for the confirm if needed. It was a great wall from Gilliara as well, too, to really help kind of seal that kill in from them after Quig found that push to start that off. And Gilly, this is someone who has been around for a while. An old school player, was one of the Juice Boys for a while with Dust and TV back in like 2015, if I'm not mistaken. This dude's certainly been around for a long time at this level. He's not unfamiliar to it. And I think that's just a good play from Return, the three of them on that right-hand side, looking for a little bit of pressure onto this Hercules after Snatty made him back earlier with their trade in lane.
Yeah, and especially with how that trade kind of was at all forms of equity in that lane. Now you see a one-level advantage for Snatty. Hasn't gone back yet, or used his TP rather to get back to lane already. But if that's how things were dead even in the lane, could get a little bit more difficult for Chronic just to stay safe there. Gilly, realizing maybe there's an opening here, is going to start to rotate back towards that blue buff side. He's going to check the Harpies and won't go for the speed buff, but won't find anything out on the other end. I think Hercules solo is absolutely an interesting conversation piece. Like, the early game damage we're so used to seeing in the jungle. You rotate, you gank mid lane, maybe set up some kills for the rest of your team. Doesn't quite have the same kill potential, I suppose, on the Osiris, but once rotations begin, what do you make of a Hercules here in the solo lane?
He'll still be just as disruptive, man. His ability to set up a fight and all that stuff is still there, maybe even with a bit more kill potential, because he can go for more of a bruiser rebuild. But I do feel like maybe you waste some of Hercules' best points in the game when you bring him over here, but certainly still strong. There's going to be a lot of action happening on the right side, and Nehu not rotating in wouldn't have beats if he did, as Thor's already dunked.
Oh, Thor drops down, and he'll get the kill over onto Chronic, and that's going to be the Scarab's Blessing for Monster onto himself, and that's Cloud again plugging down some good damage. So keep note, Cloud, despite kind of late rotations to some of these fights, has been able to pull back and assist on that mid lane Nuwa. That's sort of what you expect when you get the global ultimate pressure like that. Nehu hasn't really been under all that much pressure, but still Finch a one-level differential kind of all across the map, except for in the Hunter role. Data, remember, has a one-level lead over Griff, but you'll get support. Mid lane, jungle, and in solo lane, everyone from Return one level ahead.
Yeah, so far this game has been entirely at Return's pace, right? Except for the one kill that Button Mashers have gotten. It's been mostly pressure on the right-hand side. Giliara has out-rotated Jingu Bang over here. I don't think we've seen Nehu even be able to consider trying to step over and help out with these skirmishes either. So Return, no, they're likely in a 3v2, a 4v3, right, on this right side of the map. And they've got some just better ultimates for this point, too, in a world where Nehu's not over here. It's a little bit more defensive from those members of Button Mashers who show up in the Khepri, if he's over here on this part to try and help out. So Return, I think, have kind of recognized where they have a small advantage in the early game, and they've really pressed it well so far. It's up to Button Mashers, I think, now to try and find some place where they can look for a little bit of pressure on their own in the other direction, right? Where can Jingu Bang look to be active on the map in this time now? Maybe look to try and pressure Clow out, force the fire charge from him early so that maybe that can't be used as part of that gank on the right side to help out with Return. Something like that to try and tip the scales back a little bit more in Button Masher's favor.
I suppose that's always the threat when you're playing against a Thor, and especially as a Pele. Obviously, speed and rotation ability is there. You want to talk about massive, rotation potential in an ultimate. Gilly certainly has that. Pressure still continuing. Realizing the blue buff is about to come back up, Return are going to push 4 members over towards this blue buff side. But look out, Jingu Bang has found his way into the backline. He's deleted Clow in the mid lane, and Giliara turn around the kill. He doesn't want to go toe-to-toe with Jingu Bang just yet. Level equality, but from range, Gilly, he'll finish off the kill. Monster Bomber does go down as well on the back end of this fight. So a 2-for-1, but Chronic will clean up Snatty. It's a 2-for-2 suddenly. But Giliara drops down Anvil of Dawn late in this engagement. Chronic taken low. Thunder crashes back in, and Nehu is now rotated in. There's a full 4v4 with the Hunters going toe-to-toe elsewhere on the map. And it's Griff now who has to retreat. And Data, remember, hit the final shot. He can. My goodness, Finn. Just what's hard to keep up with. Quig might be the final one to go down. It's going to be the delayed deicide here. That is all 5 members of Return who end up going down, but the respawn timer's short enough that it won't be the deicide. But talk about a swing in this game. Button Mashers find an opening.
Yeah, and that starts with Jingu Bang, right? Getting that kill into Clow early on. It's funny, that's almost exactly how I said that was going to end up happening. Maybe not necessarily to the point of a kill, but pressuring Cloud kind of as that centerpiece early so they wouldn't get some extra help from the new Wa really was a big difference maker for him. And then relatively winning the trade up against Giliara on the backside of that as well on the Thor was pretty big for them. Nehu got to be involved in that fight too. I think that was the first time where he was able to rotate over. It was a fair 4-on-4 on the right side of that map from the beginning that time, which made a big difference for Button Mashers as opposed to those slight numbers advantages that Return had on those blue buffs. Button Mashers got to keep doing the same thing. Every time the blue buff is up, Return are here to invade, so they got to show up in numbers.
Well, Snatty now is going to stunned down a couple, and this Osiris certainly doesn't have any problem controlling some of the members of Button Mashers that are close by. Griff moves his, or Giliara rather, moves his way into the blue buff side. Was able to be stolen away as Snatty has picked that one up. Jingu Bang stunned down. There's a Scarab's Blessing on him. Watch out for the Anvil of Dawn. Oh, Cloud procs the Scarab's Blessing just for a little extra damage. Doesn't end up meaning much on the back side of it, but another successful blue buff invade here from Return. And Finch, with so much action kind of on one side of the map, maybe easy to forget what happened over there in the long lane in that fight where Data Remember finds himself a solo kill over Griff. Now a 2-level discrepancy in the long lane. Could get worse here in the solo lane as Snatty gets the kill. But in a meta now where everyone has started to shift away from the long lane, you leave the Hunters alone, you got to be worried about leaving Griff now 2 levels and 2 kills behind.
I almost wonder if it's better to kind of just trust Griff to tread water over there in that matchup, right? I mean, if you want to rotate over, potentially you could just walk into the wood chipper. That is Data Remember as well. Some pressure certainly warranted, right? You don't want to let that just keep happening on its own, but you don't want to overcommit to that either. As now Button Masher's the one considering a bit of a buff invade, going well for them. This has been a real roller coaster match. It's been seesawy back and forth. And it came when Button Mashers found their way to respond to that blue buff pressure. They're now a bit back on top of it. And it is an extra boon for them that Data Remember is ahead of Griff in such a significant manner. They can start to have him rotate a bit over now if they want to keep having fights over there on right, or maybe start their own around these Furies. I think either one makes some sense now if you're Button Mashers.
Watch out, Giliar. He gets Thunder crashed on, but the silence will wear off in time for the disengage. Gold Fury started up. Plenty of burn potential here. Data Remember with 2 kills. Taiko Drums will be used to finalize the Gold Fury here, and it's a clean disengage. So you look at the gold map there. Big sweeping spikes. Granted, when we're talking the hundreds of gold instead of thousands, you tend to see that. Really, the first time in a little while, Button Mashers have been able to get themselves back into the driver's seat. I completely agree with the point you just made, where it's been Return pressuring this blue buff time and time and time again, and they'll get another one taken away here as Snatty this time will walk in uncontested. I wonder if Button Mashers now start to look for some fights on that side of the map. Maybe less likely, though, once the Gold Fury is taken down. It's a defensive ultimate used by Griff as well, so Button Mashers pull themselves about 1,000 gold ahead.
Yeah, and you got to remember the context of this game as well, Dulcin. I think that's got to be pretty big, right? Because later on, Button Mashers have this Khepri revive, right? They have Raijin in the late game. They've got a Rom, perhaps just the best late game hunter when you consider how potent a steroid is, how auto attack focused this kit is, who's ahead of Griff on this Hachiman. Things are, even though they're looking fairly even in the charts, might be looking pretty Button Mashers favored when you consider the different natures of these compositions. And I don't mean to say that Return cannot fight in the late game. I do just think that Button Mashers are bringing better tools for it almost across the board. At 30 minutes, I think I'd rather have Button Mashers picks than Returns. Yeah,
I think it'd be hard to disagree with that, and Button Mashers have set themselves up perfectly here. Could start to force the issue. Now it's a red buff invade for Button Mashers. Double stun, so good wall there from Giliara. Scarab's Blessing used on Monster Bomber himself. Last shot of the Taiko Drums won't connect. Nehu have to burn both of the actives, and he'll go down on the back end. Now Griff has got himself in the kill column. Jingu Bang pushed back. One more shot from Griff will do it, but it's Quig instead who finds the kill. 2 for none so far from Return. Data Remember just sending out some shots. He's going to go down, and it's Clow who picks up the kill. I say they set themselves up well there, Finch, but not doing themselves any favors as Return is able to pull back 3 kills.
Yeah, and it's just a couple mistakes there from Button Mashers. I really don't know why Nehu is so committed to trying to find that kill onto Gilly there at the back end of the fight. Best case scenario, he trades his life out 1 for 1 there, and I just can't imagine that's particularly worth it. It kind of forces Jingu Bang to overcommit with him, and they both end up dying for it. We also saw Monster Bomber use the Khepri ult on himself. He was under pressure. I get why he felt the need to do that, but that meant that ultimate didn't get nearly as much value as it normally should either there. Button Mashers just using a lot of stuff suboptimally, getting a bit ahead of themselves, and they gave way too much back to Return.
Well, blue buff invade one more time here from Return. It's going to get taken down this time around. Snatty just looking to return some good damage there. But it is Button Mashers who are able to secure their blue buff. I'm kind of thinking of this this Khepri pick just a little bit more, and it seems like we're starting to see, and maybe it just makes sense, But the Khepri tends to get picked in these compositions where maybe you want to slow things down, move yourself to the late game, maybe opens up the doors to for a mistake or two with kind of that bailout button in the Scarab's Blessing. Hasn't had massive returns maybe up to this point yet, but a kill or two to kind of keep you in the game a little bit longer. Well, that's what we started to see turn some games even at the SPL level.
The Pyromancer looks like it's going to be started and completed by Return. Really don't see anyone nearby. Chronic's on his way, but doesn't get there in time. So that is the objective secure, but there's tons of pressure for Button Mashers on other sides in response. This has been a little too much from Button Masher here lately. They gave a little bit too much away in the jungle, but this game's certainly still in their control. The only problem, I think, though, is that Monster Bomber has given up a lot of his farm this game.
Whoa, Jingu Bang deletes Giliara and might get deleted in return. There's that Scarab's Blessing just as we're talking about it. There's a Nene Kappa chasing them down, but won't result in much there. So on perfect timing, it's Monster Bomber able to save the life of Jingu Bang. Talk about a clean in-and-out kill there. And now you look at what was a 1 to 2 level differential there with Giliara out ahead. This Pele has shown us, even despite a level being a level down, Jingu Bang can delete a lot of these low health targets. If you're Giliara, if you're Clow, if you're Griff, and you got Jingu Bang in your backline, you don't have your actives, you're in for a tough time.
Yeah, he went third item Transcendence, so that means a ton of power is on the way. Aaron Dite will be right behind that for another big power spike for this Pele. So the hits are going to keep coming, so to speak, right? This is there's still plenty of good Beatles albums to come out for Jingu Bang here, so to speak, down the line. So things are gonna keep getting better for him. I mean, same for Giliara though, right? Brawlers, Hydras with more pen behind him. He could still go Crusher in this slot, or Jotun to feel pretty good about either one at this point. So both these junglers getting stronger. It's just that they're both going a very sort of glass cannon-y build. There's potential for either one of them to die in the other direction. That's why I give the slight edge to the team with a revive.
Data Remember is going to play out some good damage here. Giliara has to move himself away, but who's in the back line but Jingu Bang, and will get rid of the return jungler. Quig taken low as well. Could be a double kill on the menu for Jingu Bang, and it certainly is. And now back to the Primal Fury for Button Mashers. Return 3 members just kind of limping in towards the Fury. But it's going to be Chronic who's able to zone them out, and Button Mashers pull things back one more time.
And I think now Return have to have a better read of the state of the game. They're not the ones with the numbers advantage in that fight at all. It was like a 3v2 at best for them, maybe even a 4v2 you could argue in Button Mashers' favor as they grab that Fury and start to extend their lead even further. And I think Return have to kind of recognize that they're now the ones who need to wait a little bit to see where Button Mashers are going and figure out what their response is. They have a ton of tools that are great at that, right? The Fire Charge ultimate from Clow is guaranteed information. It could be that last bit of damage there too if they need that. It could be a versatile tool. Giliara's ultimate can be used a bit earlier also to gather information, or for great counter engage. I don't know if Return are still in the driver's seat and can afford to be stepping up onto neutral ground like that and getting caught off guard. They didn't really have the information, and that's why they ended up falling. But I think in a world where they don't have it, they can't feel comfortable stepping up into neutral ground.
Yeah, the proactivity has been with Button Mashers here. And remember, just prior to like 2 picks ago for Jingu Bang, I said there's still a level differential where Jingu Bang is down 1 level. Well, Giliara just leveled up to 15. There was a 2-level lead suddenly for Jingu Bang. It's been Giliara that's kind of walked in, gotten engaged on, hasn't been able to say much in a lot of these fights. Snatty has continued to pour out some good damage for Return, despite kind of the spiral out of control as the rest of this map has gone. Granted, he's been able to kind of bully this Hercules from the start off, but there it is. The 2-level differential is now brought on back up. Been kind of clinical from Button Mashers in getting Giliara uncomfortable and kind of forcing him out of this game at level 15.
And you saw just now, Clow is really being liberal with these usages of the ultimate. There are 3 members of Return in left trying to see if they can collapse on Data. Remember, they had the information. He was basically alone in left, and so Day just dipped. He pieced all the pieces together, said, I'm not going to end up being that combo for you. That doesn't mean they lose the tier 1 tower, but I think that's that same sort of restraint that Button Mashers have shown that Return haven't, that have allowed for them to get back to this point where they're feeling pretty good about the game state. It's obviously still even in all the metrics, but doesn't it feel like the wind is blowing Button Mashers' way? And I think that really does bear out in the comps as well.
And I think we wondered where the button mashers would start to take some of these fights. We'd figured it'd be over here on the left side of the map. I mean, button mashers have kind of said, all right, you know, if you're just going to keep invading the blue buff, I don't mind it. You know, it's going to be Snatty, who's still somewhat strong for return. All of the
Snatty
purple
hasn't
buff
been in that many fights lately.
Right. They've kind of kept this Osiris on an island out there on the right side. I mean, 5 of the 8 kills, certainly nothing to be scoffed at, but you can see the confidence on this left-hand side of the map for button mashers, and that's where some of this big swing has come. Now, there is a gold deficit, despite all of the above. In return, about 200 in the lead, so I guess you call it a deficit, but that's just the ebb and flow of the waves, I suppose, still making a bit of a difference here. But now you look at the big objectives. Pyromancer, Fire Giant, and the state of the game at the moment, it might be button mashers feeling confident despite being even in gold at 22 minutes with their composition.
It's a good start here for Chronic, though, with the pull, but doesn't look like they're heavy committing. It's worth keeping in mind, Jingu Bang has a power spike finish with that Erendite that Giliara doesn't, since he's still sitting on tier 2 of the Mace tree. That might be why button mashers feel like they got a slight edge in this.
Whoa, it's Chronic who blinks forward into the back line of return. Quig there to try to take away the Pyromancer on an island on his own. Chronic is going to go down. Anvil of Dawn connects over onto Jingu Bang. 1v1 between the junglers. Scarab's Blessing, though, will pull the Pele on back. Giliara doesn't have the res and left limping away from this fight. Data Remember in back behind the Harpies. Snatty looking for the final shot, and it's Griff who will get it. Suddenly, button mashers left disengaging from this fight. They couldn't complete the kills on the targets that they had set out for. Looks like Return were able to win this engagement.
Wow, and they're going to go right to the Fire Giant startup. This is a great call from them. 2 things went wrong there, Dave, as Jingu Bang is still under pressure. Is that his gank, or his 1v1 didn't go very well, and Chronic got a bit baited by his own 2-man pluck. He kind of stuck around too far behind, wasn't able to displace anyone, and with the driving strike on cooldown, they just hard committed there to him. And with those 2 levels of the engagement going poorly for button mashers, Jingu Bang and Chronic's engages really not working, there was really no way for them to win that fight on the backside after.
And you know, we've talked, I think, about the scaling of the button mashers comp, but I suppose that opens up the door to a different conversation, that is kind of team fight engage there for that squad. I mean, we've seen what Hercules can do in taking over some of these team fights. But outside of that, would you argue maybe that Return has more consistent engage with an Osiris, a Thor, and a Kuzumbo on their side?
They have some good tools for it, but I really don't even know that it came so much down to it that time. It was really kind of Return getting engaged on, and it just didn't really pan out for button mashers due to a couple of execution mistakes there from them. But you saw the difference. I think that if Chronic dies for free without the Scarab's Blessing, or if Jingu Bang dies for free without the Scarab's Blessing, it's going to be hard for them to win.
Watch out, Data Remember. Anvil of Dawn down, and Return will pull back one more kill. And this is worst case scenario. Now you have no Hunter on this base defense. 3-4 members of Return barreling down the left lane, all with Fire Giant. A pluck in on a Snatty, but look how much damage this Osiris is just shrugging off. It's going to be left side Phoenix here. Cloud will get rid of Nehu. Jingu Bang on the defense, and it's a killing spree for the Osiris. 3 members dead for button mashers for at least 30 seconds. Monster Bomber's going to have to Scarab's Bless him himself, but he'll be rooted in place. Finch, it's only Chronic left alive, and 5 members of Return might bear down onto the Titan.
Yeah, there are still quite a few towers up, 3 still up, but at this point, there's really no one left on button masters to defend. So yeah, I mean, this is it, right? Return with a couple of good fights in a row, able to bring this game to a conclusion. I really do think that it's just that a couple of these fights never went well. I don't think they ever got enough value out of Chronic on the Hercules in the solo lane from what I saw. I mean, I know that they were able to rotate people over and defend the blue buff invades a couple of times, but aside from defense, he never got to be an offensive tool for this squad at all. And then you saw how just maybe one bad engage from Jingu Bang, even with the res on him from the Kepri, kind of was enough for them to get run over by Return's comp.
I think I big agree on the Chronic point there with Hercules. I mean, you draft a Hercules for not only early game, but continued throughout the game aggression, damage, in-your-face play, and if there's no follow-up or you kind of get baited by your own engage, well, things can start to spiral out of control. And kind of on the flip side of that, I think Snatty was just unable to be dealt with there by the end. And you look at where Return put their pressure in this game, Finch, the continued blue buff invades, though early on didn't result in these big sweeping kills, actually kind of got button mashers back in the game once or twice. By the end of it, Snatty was near unkillable, and an Osiris can punish you for it.
Yeah, he was the difference maker. I think it's worth mentioning, we didn't talk much about some of the itemization, but that anti-heal was a big reason why Chronic got blown up so quickly on that front line, too. I mean, the Divine Rune was picked up early on for Clow. Obviously, the Osiris just has it in his kit with the Lord of the Afterlife as well. And so that means that when Chronic goes for those initiations, he had 3 to 4 people basically alone with him on the top side of Fire Giant, while the rest of the squad was doing Pyromancer. And so in a world where he's already got that driving strike on cooldown, they had enough anti-heal to burst him down quickly, and they never were in a comfortable position again after that fight.
And there was kind of this tug of war over in the long lane as well, where Data Remember really pulled out ahead, but there towards the end, it was maybe Griff who started getting the better of it.
Yeah, I don't know if Griff's hands were ever on the rope. Maybe you give credit to the rest of Return for pulling so hard, but I think it's hard to chalk any of that up to what Griff did there for him. You kind of let him down, I think, at the beginning of the game, dying near that purple buff somewhat unnecessarily, and then soloed later on as well, too. So one part of the game went really well, I guess you could say, for button match in the long lane, but nowhere else did it look as good for them in that late game.
Do you think really this game, with as back and forth as it was, do you think that really just boils down to the poor engagement there by the Fire Giant and everything? Well, obviously the game ended like 4 or 5 minutes later, but we were relatively even up to that point, and sometimes, and you know, this is SOC, but these guys still incredibly good at the game. Maybe it just spirals out of control right then and there.
Yeah, it's a great argument for at what cost, right? It's like, not only was that kind of the only fight they'd lost really at that point, but they lost it so cleanly that they were able to get kind of run over by Return on the backside of it. They did not have to commit very much to get the kill onto Chronic on that Hercules, and that really was the big problem maker for them. Jingu Bang needs to be able to dive in, get the kill, and leave with that Khepri res. Instead, they just did the leave with the Khepri res part, none of the diving and getting the kill part, and that made things a little bit too easy for Return.
Yeah, it's true. As defensive as a utility as the Scarab's Blessing can be, it's, you know, kind of a life rope, ideally after you've already done something, instead of just saving your life in the middle of a team fight before you've been able to impact it. Now, moving into picks and bans for game number 2 here in this set, where Return were able to strike force. Morgan, taken off the board first. Uller there as well. Jormungandr difference here for Return. We've seen the Yorm in the solo lane, and I don't know if we've seen Yorm in the support role here in a minute, but with how kind of ebb and flowy that solo lane was in that game, Snatty kind of running away with it there for Return. Do you like the idea of banning away the Yorm now that there's a King Arthur locked in?
I love it, right? It's not just because you're picking the King Arthur and Yorm's a great matchup into it, but after watching Chronic that game, I don't want to give him a free lane, and that's what Jormungandr kind of is, right? It's a free lane where it's so hard for you to pressure that person and get anything substantial off of it unless you're really heavily committing. So I think that what they've kind of said is, we're fine with you taking something like a Hercules or an aggressive pick again, because my boy Snatty just proved that he runs that 12 days to Sunday, right? That's his. So at this point, you get the King Arthur, that's kind of your Jhin card in that lane, and you take away a lot of the safe options.
But I'm nervous now if I'm button mashers after what we saw Snatty do on the Osiris as he was able to scale into the lane with what a King Arthur can kind of turn around. Rom, again, Data Remember had the solo kill. I mean, it was, I would argue, a pretty quiet game for the Hunters. I mean, they were obviously impactful, but it wasn't necessarily the large overall talking point there in that one. But Data Remember, if nothing else, did show what this Rom is now capable of. You set up kills for yourself, and then you can snipe them away even if you're out of that immediate kill confirm range. But possibly the bigger talking point here is Yemoja left unbanned to pair with that Rom in the long lane. So while there is early game clear potential, now there's a little extra kill potential there as well with the Yemoja in your lane.
It is a bit scary for me, though. I saw Monster Bomber really struggling to farm in the early game. There was a point where he was like 3 levels behind Quig when those blue buff defenses were really going well, or invades are really going well for Return. So you know, it's a bit interesting to see how Monster Bomber could potentially end up here in this game. If that Yemoja is yet again off to a really good lead over Monster Bomber, then they could potentially be in a really bad spot here for Button Masher. So it just depends on how well Monster Bomber does in this early game there for them. I think a lot of it was kind of the way that they played on purpose, where they were trying to give some other areas a lead and maybe have Monster Bomber not absorb that much farm. But I don't think you can do that same thing, have a big 3-level disparity in the supports. If one of those supports is the Emoja, she's going to take over.
Agreed. Agreed. And it's going to be Achilles in the solo lane this time for Chronic after having mitigated impact, I'd argue, in game number 1 on that Hercules. Something we've seen an Achilles do is kind of run away with the game. Once the execute's starting to connect, I mean, sometimes one of those free execute kills is all you need to kind of keep yourself in a game, turn the fight around for your team. The Khepri banned out, though, interestingly enough. That's been kind of one of the big counters, or Achilles has been one of the big counters to the Khepri. Won't see that interaction here this time around. Instead, Merlin and Wukong are going to round out the pick ban phase here for return. It's going to be a Merlin versus a Discordia there in the mid lane, Finch.
It is. I'm glad these teams are acknowledging that Merlin is still pickable, and he's certainly great. It is also of note that it looks like it's going to be the Sun Wukong jungle here for return. This time they're going to let Giliara pilot. I don't see any other assassins available here at this point, and we got to assume Emoja's going support, so that just leaves the Wukong jungle. We see a lot more of this warrior jungle, and when he can get off to a really good start, it is hard to beat. But Thor is one of those junglers, I think, that can particularly punish these warriors sometimes because he stretches the map so well, and he might give them a chance to where they miss out on their opportunity to impact the early game with some of those warrior-based stats.
I feel like what we've seen from Warrior in the jungle, though, these Nikes, the Vimanas, they've had these kind of big, sweepy team fight ability. You look at a big Sentinel of Zeus who's going to get a massive slow, huge shielding, set up a fight for your team. Do you get that with a Wukong, though? I suppose is the question that we can address as we move into game number 2 between Return and Button Mashers. The chuckles maybe means you have some thoughts on the matter.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I'm 100% sold on Wukong jungle in particular. I'm a big fan of saying that... Yeah, I mean, Wukong is, I've always described him as the we're not going to get decided god, because he'll survive it almost certainly, right? He has too many tools for him to be the first one that dies. I just don't know how particularly valuable that is in the jungle. But he's got plenty of damage. His clear speed's not bad. He moves around really fast. If he is going to use that bird form to help him move around the jungle there too. So it's definitely not great, but it's not bad either. It kind of makes me wonder why is really when I see it. I don't think it does enough that much better than a lot of the other available assassins.
I feel like I've seen it, though. I'm trying to remember where I've maybe seen, maybe in the SPL once or twice. I don't know. I'll have to go back and kind of remember where I've seen it previously. But more recently, it's going to be Return trying to forge that one into victory. What we haven't seen all that much is this Kernanos. Day to Remember won't be on the ROM this time. It's going to be Griff instead. So I'm wondering now how the dynamic of this lane starts to look. Kernanos obviously has some good, big AoE poke potential in this lane. Do you think that's going to be a big difference maker?
It could be. He gets the lifesteal for free as well, remember, off that first ability, which I think is a pretty big deal in how the early trades could go. His kill potential is sneaky high in the trades as well. If he's able to get that wild hunt out, a lot of the times for confirm or just to guarantee a couple more shots, auto, dash, auto, can be a lot of burst damage too from the Kernanos, which maybe you don't expect. And depending on which stance he's in with the one, he could have a lot of extra damage there too. Kernanos is one of those sneaky good picks right now. I think he's popular amongst some of the casual ranks, but we don't see him that much in the SPL. And I think Day to Remember has a chance to show us exactly what he can do here.
There was some early pressure that opened up the door for Quig and Griff to roundabout and lock down those oracles. Relatively all quiet there. Different look completely at the solo lane here in this game, Finch, and one where Snatty was kind of able to run away with things by the end, 5-1 and something on that Osiris. King Arthur maybe looking to have a bigger impact early on here as Button Mashers are going to engage in the long lane. That's a shell used. Griff will be able to round about his way around the backside. So it's no kills on the board, Finch. If you look at relic usage, no more beads for Griff, no more shell for Quig. This Return long lane, despite being pushed up against this tier 1 tower, now may be open to a gank in the coming few minutes.
Monster Bomber's having a good lane so far. Just found the 2-man wall stun. He's the reason Griff felt like he had to roll forward into the enemy team, which is what cost them their shell and their beads. Griff's been a little bit more in the liability category so far than I would say in the asset category for return, but we know what his high-end looks like, so there's plenty of chance for him to turn this around.
That's going to open up to the purple buff invade, but unable to lock it down are the button mashers, and return will return. Only one thing left to take down. Snatty trying to spin his way away from first blood, but once the cooldowns are off, maybe he goes down, but instead, Giliara is here, and that's enough to make button mashers think twice. That's a one level lower there on that Wukong. Surprised at all, maybe to see the button mashers not chase that one down a little bit heavier.
I think that's the right call in that spot. Once Giliara shows up, you kind of have to give up. It is a King Arthur, too. He's so hard to lock down, and they'd used so many cooldowns already. But I guess, you know, we got our answer. The Wukong was fearsome enough showing up there in that spot that they gave up on it. I think still, though, that retreating there is the right call. They already got a lot of what they wanted just with that pressure onto Snatty there anyway, with him looking for a bit more, as maybe there's more fighting in mid.
Jingu Bang gets taken quite low here. Cloud, no health, no mana, but Giliara there for the body block. So now we've seen one member of either team taken down to red HP, but neither team has been able to capitalize. Griff taken down to half HP, so this lane certainly hasn't gotten any easier. And now that we've started to reach that 4-minute mark, junglers will be hitting level 5 here shortly. Yep. That's where I wonder if this kind of jungler differential, I suppose, and immediate map pressure starts to make a difference. Once Jingu Bang gets that Anvil of Dawn online, obviously we've talked about the mobility potential of a Wukong, but I wonder if now the button mashers have delayed long enough to get Jingu Bang into a position where he can impact the game a little bit heavier.
I think that this is exactly that time, especially because they know Griff's beads are on cooldown for just a little bit longer, 10 seconds. So they should know they have a small window here, but with them this far underneath the tier 1 tower, I just don't think that it could happen. But we've seen it now happen twice, right? When we pan over to the camera, there's one member of return really low, and then a near full HP Wukong is nearby, standing. Right? I'm not 100% sold on the pitch for the Wukong is really all I'm saying.
No, listen, and I'm with you, and I think up to this point, we'll have to see if he can make a difference. This is going to be a half HP Wukong. Bird form will escape. Hey, he's able to escape, right? I mean, he's not given up first blood yet up to this point, but he can't contest over on those mid lane harpies. It is Snatty somewhat low here, but King Arthur always elusive. This has been kind of a fun solo lane to focus on here. Both have kind of gotten the better of one another at different avenues throughout this game. Monster Bomber actually staying aggressive here. It's because Jingu Bang has the Anvil of Dawn. Down he crashes. That's the stun over onto Snatty. And first blood, as we predicted, goes over to button mashers, and it's Jingu Bang who's found it.
I don't know, man. A button that does that seems pretty darn good to me. But hey, it's Wukong on the other side, and he didn't die, sort of as you mentioned. I think that's just button mashers getting some pressure. It's really Monster Bomber having a good game. I gave him a hard time in the picks and bans coming into this because he struggled a bit in the early game in game 1, but he's looked really comfortable on the Terra. He bullied Griff in lane almost single-handedly for a lot of that, forcing out the relics and the dash from him pretty repeatedly. Yep. And then just now, he was the one that got that pressure that set up for Jingu Bang to find the dunk.
Yeah, it's really been kind of this back and forth between Chronic and Snatty. I mean, if nothing else, and Achilles is going to be able to pour out some good poke damage and really set things up for you. And mitigating a King Arthur, I think is rarely a bad thing. I don't think it's ever a bad thing, especially with what King Arthur attempts to bring to the table there with early game pressure, some good damage, especially once those team fights start to rotate, or once you start to rotate into some of those team fights. And now you got a 1-level lead for Chronic. It's not like Achilles is all that much easier to deal with than a King Arthur.
It sure isn't, man. Either one of these guys could potentially take over the game, just depending on how this early laning phase goes. And right now, leaning in Button Masher's favor. You can tell Chronic's already kind of got Snatty back. Now, once he finishes off his first pair of boots, and he already has the Glad Shield finish, I think there's a good chance things could swing back, and Snatty could reclaim the pressure here in this lane. That's why Button Mashers have to kind of keep up this pressure, if that's what they want. If they want to pressure out solo and try and control it, then they have not done enough yet. There's got to be more.
Pressure moving over to this right side of the map. Snatty has no mana. I mean, we'll be able to participate to the tune of a few abilities. Look at Monster Bomber going in. We'll drop the ultimate. That's a River's Rebuke to crash down. Anvil of Dawn searching for a target. Execute could be found over onto Giliara. That's going to be the stun down, and Nehu will grab the kill. Low health is Monster Bomber, but he's able to get out of the back line of this fight. Jingu Bang still on the front line, though, looking for the kill. Giliara will slam down. There's the Wukong striking for you. I mean, nowhere else is the rest of his team. But it is a one-for-one trade here with Monster Bomber and Snatty both going down.
Yeah, man, it's almost Loki level, right? I mean, he was able to clean up that kill on the back of the fight, right? We had to use the dash and the ultimate to get in the range, and he did manage to make sure that Monster Bomber died for that great dash in he did earlier, hitting everybody with that ultimate, but still, it has not been quite the same as what Jingu Bang has been able to do with his ultimate, putting 2 deaths onto the King Arthur, and you already highlighted how huge it is to slow him down early on. I think Giliara has done a good job so far to kind of maintain that evenness, but Thor in the early game makes every enemy jungler kind of look like this, right? Because Anvil of Dawn creates so much gap in terms of your relative value at this point. But I do think that the Sun Wukong might look even a little bit less ineffective in response to it.
I wonder if this is, and maybe it's kind of the conversation around warriors in the jungle, where as the game goes on, once you get a little bit more tanky, obviously Giliara moving right into some damage, Talaria boots for a little extra mobility there as well, but depending maybe on how that build goes, you kind of have that second bruisery brawler type god on your side, whereas normally you have an assassin who kind of blows somebody up or gets blown up. So maybe just compositionally, you're not necessarily expecting a Wukong to match all of that really early on here, and once the itemization comes online, maybe in a full-blown team fight is maybe where we start to see some of those rewards. And maybe that's what we've seen from Nike here and there. Not that Sino, hasn't been able to find first blood here and there as well. But that's kind of the overarching conversation, I suppose, around this warrior in the jungle. A lot of people, I don't know if everyone knows how to feel about it quite yet.
Yeah, and that's why I don't want to do too much just conflating of warrior jungle in general, because Vamana makes a ton of sense, Nike make a ton of sense. They output as much damage as an assassin in a lot of situations, and they have the added safety of a warrior. That's why I think that we saw so much value coming out of it for Sino. I just don't know that Wukong checks all those check boxes, right? He does have that extra safety, but I don't know if he matches warrior output.
Well, not safe enough this time as Button Masher's able to turn around the kill there. Snatty and half HP has been kind of the match made in heaven throughout the first 10 minutes of this game. It's going to be a blue buff invade and a secured blue buff for Chronic there in the solo lane. Quig hasn't successfully found the big impact on the emoji in the early game just yet, but Clow will see to it that he does. That's a return kill for return here. Monster Bomber, though, makes his way into the mid lane. Apple connecting onto Clow. The damage pours through, and Neku has struck back. Griff has fallen elsewhere on the map to top it all off. Day to remember a couple of kills. Snatty drops as well. There's fighting from coast to coast here, and it looks like it's Button Mashers. They're going to be a little bit better off.
That's huge. Day to remember continues to get the better of Griff. It's not been a good day for Griff at all.
3 levels.
Not good enough, man. It really just has not been there from him. Cloud does end up dying, but he's the only one, I think, that dies in trade. He was the one that helped make sure Jingu Bang had to die for that red buff invade that he went for. He was a man on an island with no resources, no ult, no mana, any of that, at least, and he needed on the back of that. Jingu Bang did, so Clow and Quig made sure of that. But then Snatty getting soloed as well over there by Chronic. This is real bad news for Return. Button Mashers are in a great spot. But remember, I think Button Mashers were in a great spot in Game 1 as well. And Return found one team fight to turn that back around. So I don't want to get ahead of myself, but this looks great for Button Mashers so far.
Yeah, and the Merlin only gets better with time, of course, moving into the Divine Ruin, a little bit of Pen after that. It's been Spear of Desolation, I think, usually that kind of second completed item. Nehu keeping pace with that, though, so it's not like Discordia gets worse with time, but the melt potential of a Merlin certainly will only increase as the game goes on. But it seems like we're maybe in delay territory here if you return. You're 3k gold down, never really got that wide in game number 1. It was always, the 1,000 few hundred gold category that we were in. But this is far and away a lead, 12 minutes in for Button Mashers across the board. 2 levels in the solo lane, 2 levels in the mid, 3 levels in the long lane. And the conversation kind of in Game 1 was, well, Button Mashers maybe have a lead over here in the long lane. They start to take some fights around there. Kind of everywhere on the map, looks like Return are going to be fighting at a deficit. You might just be in delay territory at this point and hope you can stay alive. It's going to be difficult, though, with Jingu Bang able to re-engage on fights just like this. Clow will not be stunned down, and Apple won't connect onto anyone. Monster Bomber is able to peel for himself. And just delayed there is Giliara to get out of the fight, so Wukong will be able to stay alive. Somehow, Finch, nobody dies.
Yeah, probably any assassin dies there.
Okay.
Snatty gets taken care of by the execute from Chronic. That solo lane continues to be a problem, and the action will not be slowing down here, Dave, as Gilly falls as well.
And Griff will look for some snipes down onto Jingu Bang. 1 and 2 and 3. Oh, and that's one pulled back here for a return, but Nehu will finally put him down. Another big swing here for the button mashers. And really, you know, we expected maybe this small skirmish to go this way with how far ahead button mashers are. But it's the 1v1 out on an island, I think, that you have to look at. Snatty is 0 and 4, 13 minutes into this game. Granted, there's been a lot of pressure on that side of the map. But now Chronic can operate on his own. Now that we've seen Chronic can wear him down and execute Snatty, you're going to have to send somebody over to that lane to help out this King Arthur. Not something I expected to say 13 and a half minutes into this one.
And not based on their draft value either, right? Remember the way the return came into this game. It was banning out that Jormungandr from solo and top picking this King Arthur for Snatty in the picks and bans. They really expected this to be a source of pressure for them, that solo lane. This has been the exact opposite, man. Chronic really has gotten the better of Snatty there a couple of times. And he got a little bit of help with that early gank that he got. Jingu Bang did 2 in a row where they got those kills on the Snatty. So it's not as if Chronic got this all on his own, but he's absolutely utilizing it the best that he can now that he has it. Snatty might be a lost cause.
Yeah, I mean, Snatty tries to clear a wave there, and immediately is one more rotation of cooldowns, and that would have been an execute over onto the King Arthur. You could see Giliara just hovering close by. Now it's the purple buff being looked at by the button mashers. Quig, 1 level down from his counterpart on button mashers. The Riptide will get the Emoja away safely. Here's a good look. Can a jungler help out what is happening here in the soul lane? It is a level 15 Achilles. Instead of return, despite a 2v1, are both left running here. Snatty left out on an island, and that's a 2-tap from Jingu Bang to get Quig quite low. So I think that speaks volumes. You know, obviously a 1v1 is going to go Chronic's way 3 levels ahead, but they're not going to move away from a blue buff invade, even in a 2v1 is Chronic. In the meantime, though, the Gold Fury taken down. It's trouble. Quig, though, rotating by. Giliara is here as well. Maybe you have to bring 3. River's Rebuke just sends Chronic off to one side. Riptide pulls back the Achilles. Where does Jingu Bang go? Well, into the mid lane. And Clow is taking him down. Chronic is going to get stunned here, taken quite low. And the final stun, finally, Snatty gets himself on the board. But he's got backup to get it done. I think, Finch, what's more surprising is you send 3 members over to the solo lane and somehow Return are still able to find a kill elsewhere with Jingu Bang despite a numbers discrepancy.
It is. That's pretty brutal that Jingu Bang ends up dying somehow there anyway. Plus, they end up losing Chronic when you consider how heavy the rotation over there was to try and take him down. Now a bit of a man fight happening in left, but Griff getting some backup. It's needed. His data member now stuck.
That's a level 17 Kernanos, and one final shot from Quig. We'll clean up that one. This is kind of sowing the seeds. Right, that's what this is what you have to do, I suppose, in these games. Hope somebody overextends. Now it's Monster Bomber, who's a little bit too far out. I don't imagine Snatty will shy away from this one. That's a solo shell burnt there from Monster Bomber to stay alive. Jingu Bang in range, but Snatty might feel confident in that one. Sometimes, Finch, this is what opens the doors to these games. There's a far and away lead for one team, and they just overextend. A little bit too confident, moving too far forward, a little bit out of sorts, and Return have been able to pull back a few kills.
I'm really hoping this doesn't force this Wukong back into some relevancy, because boy did he lay an egg in the early game here, didn't he? I mean, even though he stayed relatively close to farm level with Jingu Bang's impact on the map was so much bigger, right? That lead for Chronic was almost entirely as a result of Jingu Bang and Monster Bomber's relentless pressure on that right side of the map around those first couple of blue buff spawns for it. So you might be getting into that point where now you just have an extra Wukong on your team who's hard to kill, but they had to seed a lot in the early game to make that happen. But button mashers just need to pull up a little bit. They're getting a bit out of control, and they definitely still have a lot of the same advantages they had earlier. You guys got to make sure they're playing to him. You want Nehu in those fights, and you want to play around him. You want Chronic in those fights. You want to play around him too, and let Jingu Bang kind of put the seal on things with his ultimate instead of being the first one in.
What if we're getting into Mifflin Scylla territory here with Giliar on the Wukong
it's
in the
jungle?
Maybe, right. I mean, I don't think without reason. I mean, Giliara at 1, 2, and 3 has been able to find some impact here in this game. And as we mentioned, always going to be less than a Thor. Hard to match that up to this point. There is a small rotation over to the solo lane, but fighting into Chronic is always going to be difficult. But what you have seen now is Snatty has been able to stay safe enough since going 0-4, gotten a kill, and pulled back a couple of levels. It was a 2-3 level differential there in the solo lane. So King Arthur, despite kind of being mitigated, won't be denied all that much longer. There is an execute for Chronic over onto Giliara, so the Achilles continuing to hurt. Now it's Snatty against the world here, and this is a 4-man collapse, and King Arthur's just going to farm up some damage here, maybe even get a kill over onto Jingu Bang. I thought it was done and dusted, but the Thor taken a little bit low. Chronic pulls back a couple of kills, and that's going to be the Pyro for Button Mashers.
Hey, it's good to see that both teams are willing to make the same mistakes, right? I don't know what had happened that made Return think that they should be up near Button Mashers' Tier 2 tower. Quig couldn't make it over there too. He got zoned out, but there was no way they were winning that one, right? Button Mashers win it, now they're starting up the FG.
Maybe Quig steals away a Fire Giant, and that's the route back in here. Has burned the charges of his one. Button Mashers take down the Fire Giant. There's a moment of hesitation where you wonder if it'll happen. They get the FG and a kill onto Quig to kind of put the icing on the cake. That's an 18.5-minute Fire Giant, by the way. Kind of easy to forget with the way some of these games have been going. A 6K gold lead here for Button Mashers. Yeah, they did.
They forgot the way the game was going, and suddenly they were the ones thinking that they got active. I know that Button Mashers made some mistakes and gotten overzealous there a bit, but they certainly were not back in control. But they've allowed the order to be restored here at this point. And now things get a lot more difficult for Return in terms of how they find this base defense. They've got some great tools like Clow on this Merlin, but it ain't going to be easy.
Well, Snatty feeling confident enough to defend this Tier 2 tower and is left at half HP, licking his wounds. Button Mashers, now, I mean, this is the point in the game where you got to be clinical. You got a massive gold lead. You take down these towers, open Phoenix in the mid lane, open Phoenix now in the long lane. We'll move back. Fury is about to respawn for ourselves. We've got good deep ward coverage. I like this smart and patient play from Button Mashers rather than trying to force a fight somewhere.
Yeah, this is the right call. The Oni Fury, perhaps the most valuable Fury they could be getting at this point in the game, too, when you've got Fire Giant and you want to be the team sieging. Now those Oni minion waves should split the focus of Return a lot. So let's take this opportunity where everyone's like, what, 1,500 gold plus to back and spend, reset, essentially, and they'll be able to come out and push with these waves. And the task gets so much harder now for Return. Button Mashers, if they split this base defense up with something like a 3-2-4-1 split, it should be really tough for Return to defend it.
It's a Mantle of Discord to round out Chronic's build there. So got the shields, of course, and then the Mantle to kind of round things out here. So as if it's difficult to kind of lock down an Achilles that's 4-1-3 at level 18 anyway. That build is certainly going to allow him to bruise you up enough, and maybe as an Achilles, that's all you want to do. If I can bruise you down to execute threshold, then I've done my job. Giliara is now getting the receiving end of that one, and will be executed nonetheless. Final charge used to clear out some of those minions. So 5, 1, and 3 is Chronic now on the Achilles, and he's going to push down the long lane. A couple members of Return are close by. They're going to complete those backs as 3 open Phoenixes in the Return base.
And I was willing to make the argument that Chronic wasn't even the headline. I'd be worried about Day to Remember, too, after the day he's had so far. But then he wouldn't prove me wrong with a big kill over there to the left. Now they're ready to start sieging this Phoenix over and right. And it's going to be all the full 5 stack over here, Dave.
And it's Toxic Blade for Day to Remember, as you point out. So some of that good healing is going to be lessened a little bit. Where does Jingu Bang go down? The fight has sprung out underneath this right side Phoenix. Tremble right as Jingu Bang slams down, but I don't think that'll delay the Button Mashers much longer. Snatty, half HP, Apple will plug down some good damage here, but watch out, Griff starting to hit some of those big crits. Look at the health bar for Button Mashers melting under the pressure of Return here. I can't believe I'm saying it, but maybe the Phoenix dive a little bit too much for the Button Mashers, and Giliara will complete the execute. Watch out as Snatty has made his way into the front line. It's Chronic left alone here. Griff will be able to plug down some damage, slowed down by Cloud. The execute used defensively. Chase is on. Blink is going to maybe get this Achilles out. But something goes horribly wrong there, Finch, and Button Mashers are the ones limping away.
A couple things. Quig has a great fight. I thought that River's Rebuke from him was great underneath that right side Phoenix. Jingu Bang hits almost nothing that whole fight. I think his wall did stun 2 members, but the ult in didn't find much either. He couldn't pick a target and tried to come down on everyone in between and ends up hitting really nothing. And so I think that Button Mashers could have made that fight work, but they didn't go with the split I asked for either, right? It was all 5 of them allowing the 4 members of Return to group up into their strongest form. I just think Button Mashers didn't do any of those things correctly on the Phoenix Siege to turn what should have been a favorable fight into a 1-1.
Right, and then the Phoenix kind of providing that 6th man there in the engagement. Make no mistake, it's still a 7k gold lead here for the Button Mashers, but Fire Giant buff has now worn off. Jingu Bang actually looking to re-engage here. No Snatty is on a bit of an island. Won't actually end up completing the engagement there. So Return left moving away, but now the big topic is, all right, Fire Giant is worn off. It respawns here in 15 seconds. It's going to be a free pyro over to Button Mashers. How confident are you maybe feeling if you're Return in contesting this FG after a good Phoenix defense?
I don't know, man. You want to come up and maybe do a little bit to stop it, but you just had a really good Phoenix defense, right? So maybe give it another go. They didn't have... I guess this time, they'll have the Fire Giant, and maybe you don't feel quite as good about your chances in that situation, but it looks like they are going to make the call to at least give this up and maybe try another defense. I think that if Cloud gets to have another defense where he never has to use any relics for it, and he just gets to be Merlin in the backline for free, I think Return feel good about it. So maybe they can win this next one here, too.
We have reached that point. I mentioned Merlin only gets better with time. Nehu's kept pace with him on build, and even a little bit ahead as the Obsidian Shard completed there. Klaus still working on it. But underneath these Phoenixes, if Klaus able just to sit back, still has the Aegis, still has the beads, as you point out. Giliara, though, has moved his way down this long lane. Tier 2 tower being looked at by the Sun Wukong. Couple members of Button Mashers moving their way to mid lane, so we will at least see a bit of a split here this time, Finch. Maybe that bodes well for Button Mashers with another Fire Giant in their back pocket.
I like this a lot better, the 3-2 split here for them, to try and make life a lot harder for Return. What you really want is an opportunity to try and isolate Clow and this Merlin, and I feel like your chances of that go up exponentially when there's just less people around him, and then you can use your ability to rotate around with Jingu Bang to get an even bigger numbers advantage that next time.
It's been a lot of counter-engage from Return. Button Mashers swing in, and can Return maybe catch them out on an overextended engage has been the big question. Quig, I think, a big winner on the previous Phoenix defense. 3-2 split here with Giliara kind of flexing back and forth between either side. Quig is somewhat low here, has some decent sustain to kind of keep himself in this fight. Wave crashing down the mid lane, one shortly here in the short lane. River's Rebuke over, Quig to save his life. Thor up to the skies. Quig has found the kill over onto Monster Bomber, and Quig with the Riptide is able to get out. Oh no, the apple from range connects, and Nehu will get the kill. Giliara, though, is able to answer back with one. It's a 2-for-1 trade here with Return out on the front foot. Giliara, he's the one now finding the kills. A double for this Wukong. Day to remember goes down. Chronic, the only man left alive, and it's the 4-man sweep for Return. Another Phoenix defense gone wrong.
Man, this River's Rebuke, this Yamoja on the defense has been too tough for Button Mashers to deal with. That's twice now that Monster Bomber kind of gets isolated on that base defense on the siege by himself when he goes in. Suddenly you're overcommitted because there's no way for him to get back out on the back side of it. It's another underwhelming Thor engagement from Jingu Bang as well. He's not really been able to find his moment. He wanted to complete that kill onto Quake, but he got so disrupted for being able to find it that luckily the apple from Nehu find its way there to clean the kill up. But certainly Jingu Bang was not going to be able to find that one on his own. It's tough, man. Return really on the back of Clow and Quig in particular, and some decent fights from Giliara, I got to give it to the Wukong, have made this siege way too tough for Button Mashers. I think that they're all in committing a little too much. It's got to be these more steady, small waves of engagement. Bait out that River's Rebuke instead of fighting into it, and see if maybe they can get back out of there.
Right, because while it was different in the sense it was a 3-2 split, the engage, they were like, all right, well, we split this time, but let's try to fight the same exact way we did the first time. Right, the same exact thing underneath the right side Phoenix one more time, and it's really the apple from Nehu that pulls anything back for Button Mashers. So it's still a 5k differential. Everyone, though, in the game, Finch is at level 20, except for the supports. Quig 1 level ahead of Monster Bomber. Builds complete outside of the supports, and Jingu Bang working on one final item there for himself. We'll get to move to the skies here. Quig under the eye of Monster Bomber here. It's going to be the Anvil of Dawn down to the ground. A River's Rebuke a bit further out of the base this time. Snatty is taken low. A collapse from return here on the back line. Giliar and Chronic both late to the fray, and Apple connects for almost no damage over onto Snatty. King Arthur has reached the point now where he can bully out some of the front line of Button Mashers, but instead the Arthur takes a little bit too much damage. Giliara moves his way away.
Yeah, he walks in, uses the ult, and recognizes he has to get back out. This is a little too much from return. They're doing well on these base defenses, but that's when Button Mashers have to fight the River's Rebuke, the Phoenix defense, all this Merlin damage, all of that at once. But on this siege instead, with Snatty trying to be that frontline member, he's just getting shredded by Nehu and Data. Remember, Giliara couldn't find his way in on the side of the site there either. He got pushed out almost right away. So it's true that Button Mashers are struggling on their siege, but I don't think that return have looked that good in any fight that isn't under their own Phoenix either. That's why we've got this weird impasse that we're at right now. And a really good way to break that, I think, would be if Button Mashers were a bit more patient about their siege.
I think the big difference here, Nehu with no actives, Cloud still with both of his, and it's Nehu on the back line who's unable to get rid of the stun from Giliara. The apple tossed out. Look at the return peel from Button Mashers. 4 members turn around to get the kill onto Giliara. This could be the opening for a big fight here. Anvil of Dawn down over onto Quig, but a disengage immediately from Jingu Bang. Is this the FG call? They're hesitant. Instead, maybe just some damage over onto the Pyro.
It's worth noting, Clow and Griff still have all their relics, so if they do want to step up and contest, it's not the most dangerous thing in the world, whereas Nehu has almost nothing in terms of survivability here for this next fight. So if I'm returned, I know they're down a man, but if they can start this off getting to Nehu early on, it shouldn't be that hard to lock him down and kill him relatively quickly.
It was Giliara who made his way to Nehu and did 88% of the health bar, but was unable to finish off the kill. So Giliara still left respawning with 10 seconds left. It's Fire Giant started by the Button Mashers. Snatty is close by, but it's going to be Quig now that's stunned down. Some good damage returned by Cloud, but it's Nehu who gets the kill here. Griff on the disengage. Apple again won't connect for anything here. Griff is able to roll his way out of the stun there. Double blink forward, trying to get rid of this ROM. Beads used preemptively. There was nothing there to CC off at the end of the day. Smart play maybe by Griff. Another pick, but I don't know if return have really stopped the FG, as Button Mashers will turn their way around right to it.
Well, Snatty's in the back. Griff still has his ultimate to contest it from range 2. I think returns still have a claim to trying to strip away the enhanced Fire Giant.
Oh, Chronic just plugged down. Watch out for the snipes here from Griff, and some damage will connect, but won't finish off the kill. There's a double stun on the back line by Snatty, but it seems like there's been one member of return deep in the back line of Button Mashers every single one of these fights, and Button Mashers just 4-man peel backwards and get the kill.
Yeah, it was meant to be a collapse, but the collapse only works if both sides of that pincer are able to hold up, and that time one side wasn't, so they're able to collapse back on to Snatty kind of by himself, our Button Mashers, and get that kill pretty easily. It's tough for that to work when the other team is ahead, as a return take a little bit of extra poke.
Looking at the enhanced Fire Giant here, really been Griff, I think, that started to swing back into this game as well, fully completed on that crit build, so the ROM is going to absolutely be swinging in some of these fights. If he's left unchecked, has the Aegis, but no beads. So maybe the counter engage is going to be ever so important here. Jingu Bang potentially looking for an impactful Anvil of Dawn. Instead, it's a River's Rebuke to stall out the Fire Giant, and Griff will get the kill over onto Monster Bomber. Now it's the Anvil of Dawn looking, searching for a target. Down he goes, stunned just barely over onto Griff. The 2-tap, look at what Jingu Bang's able to do here. It's the double kill on the back line of this fight. The Aegis will delay things out. Clouda will ultimately get the kill. Return have gotten 3. Button Mashers, though, they've done the same as well. It's Monster Bomber, rather, in the previous fight that's left respawning about 20 seconds ahead of his counterparts. And these two teams continue to exchange blows.
They do, but it's crazy how critical some of these cooldowns are. For return, I think the most important one at this point now is River's Rebuke from Quig. It's been so strong, that ultimate, for locking down Monster Bomber in particular. Remember how great of an early to mid game he had? And he's felt a bit quieter, and that's because Terra is so reliant on being able to disengage with that second charge of the dash, able to go in, buy all this extra time, and then right at the last minute get back out. But the River's Rebuke is what has been telling Monster Bomber that he can't do it. He's died a lot more for these commitments later on, so it's been great work from Quig. The other element that's been really different for me is Jingu Bang, and whether he decides that he wants to put his abilities on the opponents this time or not. And this time he did, man. It did so much extra work. He was able to slowly take his time, dunk onto Griff, get behind him for the wall, hammer back through him to complete the kill and spin. But on some of these other Phoenix Sieges, he's kind of been hitting nothing. And it's been a big difference maker for Button Mashers, whether or not they have their jungler that fight.
Yeah, I mean, it just by nature of the ability, we talk about it making an impact immediately in the game. But that doesn't fall off late. I mean, he still needs to find these big stuns, some good lockdown onto the backline, and somehow a double kill from a Thor, a solo double kill effectively in the backline, doesn't end up completely going in Button Masher's favor. The wins have not necessarily shifted, though. It's still Return playing a touch defensively. It's a 7k gold lead. I'm not sure. And no contest. Continue to find pressure elsewhere on the map. Could be a collapse here. A nice wall there from Jingu Bang. Actually locks Snatty in. Chronic wants a little bit more here. Snatty taken to about 80% HP. Watch out for Jingu Bang. Down he goes on to Snatty. Monster Bomber. River's Rebuke separates this fight. Monster Bomber will be swayed out just a little bit. Giliara looking for something, anything, to keep Return in this fight, but instead it's going to be the ultimate pop to the disengage, and we're still at 5v5.
Dude, Quig is doing work, isn't he? The Riptide is literally the only thing that keeps Snatty alive this game. The River's Rebuke, again, keeps that fight from being a disaster. Yamoja is good. You know, I don't think there's any debate left over to Quig playing it well.
Griff still has his ultimate. Snatty does as well. Really the only two that are left in this fight. In goes Snatty, stunned down. Over on an A, look at the lockdown from Quig. It's gotten 3 members of the Button Mashers. Quig is going to continue his onslaught here. Jingu Bang, though, will turn things around and find the kill. It's a 2-for-1 so far for Return. Snatty still deep in the backline. Doesn't have the damage to clean up Monster Bomber just yet, and Jingu Bang will turn around and try to save his support. Chronic under 3v1 potential there will end up falling. Snatty is likely going to get taken down here as well. No, does he get out of this one? Cloud turns it around, saves his life. And now maybe Finch, it's Return who are going to bear in and maybe even finish this game.
I think they can end it from here. They should be able to, especially with Griff so healthy and it's just Monster Bomber to defend, man. Quake saved this game. I don't really know any other way to say it. It's a great performance from Snatty in that fight as well to keep 2 members zoned out so they can get that delayed kill onto Chronic. That is what helped them sort of set this all up, man. But the Yamoja really was that big difference maker for them once they started grouping up. Griff got some time to find some shots in those fights too. I don't think it was a ton of value from the Wukong. I will not bend on that issue, but everything else from Return did start to look better the later and later that game went on. And really, it felt like it was just a little bit too disjointed on the opposite side from them as well, too. They weren't able to line those pieces up.
You know what Giliara is saying is there's a tick in the win column for the Wukong in the jungle, kind of regardless, right? It was kind of it was a tale of, and you know, maybe this is a bit of a non-statement, but really a tale of kind of 2 team fights there from Button Mashers where Jingu Bang is able to get deep into the back line, find some great damage, some lockdown, some kills, and even then Button Mashers weren't really able to run away with those fights. But Finch, I gotta look back to the 2 Phoenix defenses that Return had, both complete whiffs from Button Mashers, and that's really where this game turns, I think.
I think we also lost the thread of the execute in this game, too. Chronic was hitting a lot of those in the early game, particularly on to Giliara. He was kind of taking that somersault cloud out of the equation a lot of the times and making their kills onto the Wukong a lot cleaner for them in the early game, but that kind of dropped off. He wasn't able to find those big executes the later that the game went on. So Button Mashers was losing a lot of small pieces from what made them look so strong early on. They were losing maximum effectiveness from Jingu Bang later the game went on because he wasn't able to connect the full kit. Chronic wasn't getting a lot of execute value. they were getting Monster Bomber locked down with the River's Rebukes from Quake, so he was struggling, and Day couldn't pop off the same way that he was earlier on in the games as well too. I think Return, we got to give them a lot of credit for disrupting what Button Mashers were doing earlier on in the game so well.
Oh, that's the unfortunate apple at the end there, or not really at the end, kind of midway through this game from Nehu that connected. And I think that's even an interesting conversation where, maybe it's just the ebb and flow of the game, but it seemed like there were a handful of apples that were just left searching for somebody to place themselves on. I don't know. I mean, you get kind of nitpicky down the stretch there, but in reality, it's Return that kind of keeps themselves in this game, finds fights that work for them, Quig maybe most of all, and they're able to find the 2-0 here in the finals over in the SOC in North America. I think one conversation we had coming into it, Finch, was how the SOC meta started to, maybe make its own thing, differentiate from the SPO a little bit. Quick look back at the schedule. But was everything that you saw here today a bit maybe what you expected?
Yeah, in the end, we came back to it, didn't we? Yamoja support, turns out, is still excellent, just like the SPL. Warrior jungles end up getting the job done, just like in the SPL. Play Merlin in the middle lane, guys. He's still really good, and there's no need to play some of these other weird mages when he is still up. In the end, I think we did end up coming back to some of those same staple things that got the job done for Return.
Well, big congrats to Return. They turn around game 2 there and complete the 2-0. 2 2-0s for us here. Well, technically a 2-1. Over in Europe, but a 2-0 here in North America. That's all we've got, though, here for the SOC. Remember, the SPL and the SCC both return tomorrow. SCC, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, the final week of Phase 1 of the SPL. Immediately after, Finch, a lot of good games here to look forward to in the SPL. I cannot wait to get to them. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Paige it! No! Give me the...